who have joined the session today. Continuous learning means improving yourself on a daily basis and making a better version of yourself for a better tomorrow. MASWO and its newcomer committee welcomes you to its Connected to Learn series, which aims at bringing together all the newly arrived social workers in Ontario for information exchange and professional development. Today, we have with us Meryl Verghese as the moderator for the session. Meryl has completed her MSW at the University of Toronto with specialization working with children and their families. After her undergrad, she worked as a family services worker at York Region Children's Aid Society and loved working alongside families to ensure their safety and well-being of children, youth, and families. She has also worked at Ontario Shore Centre for Mental Health Services in the Inpatient Adolescent Eating Disorders Unit as a placement student. She has practiced various therapeutic modalities and provided individual counseling and facilitated groups as well. As a placement student, she has provided support and engaged youths experiencing complex mental health and comorbidities. Apart from this, Meryl is also currently the president of the University of Toronto Student Association of Malayalis and Ontario Chair for National Federation of Malayali Association in Canada. Meryl is a person who loves her profession and is very passionate about social work. She makes it a point to give back to her community by volunteering and advocating for the minority populations. And she holds it very dear to her heart. We are very grateful to have you, Meryl, today with us as the moderator. I will now hand over the session to Meryl.
Thank you, Anju, for that great introduction. Hello, everyone. Welcome to part 4 of the Connected to Learn series. This session will be recorded for training and documentation purposes and will be uploaded on social media platforms. I would like to encourage all of you to turn your videos on for a more engaging experience. Let's start with the Land Acknowledgement. In the spirit and the intent of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's recommendation, we acknowledge the traditional Indigenous territories on which we gather at the beginning of all MASWO meetings. We would like to begin by acknowledging the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Wendat, Anishinaabeg, Haudenosaunee, Métis, the Mississauga of the Scugog, Hiawatha, and the Atherville First Nation. By learning, understanding, and acknowledging, we wish to pay respect to Turtle Island, Mother Earth, and to the rich Indigenous history of Ontario. I would like to address the impacts of the pandemic and the rise in anti-Asian hate crimes. On this occasion, we would like to acknowledge the immense pain caused by the COVID-19 pandemic in diverse areas of our lives in India, Canada, and across the globe. Some of us have lost our friends, family, and community members in India recently, and thousands of fellow beings are battling for life. Thousands of doctors, nurses, and other essential workers are in the forefront of battling the coronavirus and protecting our lives and the lives of our loved ones. With a deep sense of gratitude, we would like to acknowledge their invaluable services and assure them that our thoughts and prayers are with them and the communities in India and across the world in these difficult times. Sadly, we have seen an unprecedented spike in anti-Asian hate crimes in North America. Since the beginning of the pandemic, and Asian people have been blamed for coronavirus. We believe that the problem is largely entrenched in colonialism, supremacy, and othering of Asians in North America. MASWO strongly condemn all forms of discrimination and racism and stand in solidarity with the affected communities. Globally and locally, we are one community composed of multiple races and cultures, and our social spheres should remain safe for everyone. We strongly urge all MASWO members, our friends and partners, to support each other to diffuse any elements that adversely influence our social cohesion and unity. We are physically distant, but socially and emotionally connected. We are in this together, and we will overcome current challenges as well together. Our first speaker is our special guest, Vicky Lowry. Vicky has worked in the field of child welfare for over 25 years in London, Ontario, and the region of Peel. Vicky has a bachelor's in psychology and a bachelor's of social work from the University of Western Ontario and a master's degree in social work from McGill University, specializing in clinical work with children and families. Vicky is currently a service director at Peel Children's Aid Society. During her time with Peel CAS, she has supported a number of service initiatives and partnerships, including responsibilities for organizing domestic violence portfolio, supporting the development of a coma wraparound service response, kinship services, the infant wellness program, the serious incident response team, complex needs team, and the Peel CAS abuse review team. Vicky has participated in several community partnerships, including Peel's Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan, Peel's Anti-Human Sex Trafficking Task Force, SAFE Center for Peel Advisory Committee, Peel Committee Against Women Abuse and Success by Six. Working through an anti-racist, anti-oppressive lens, Vicky is committed to the provision of best practice, evidence-informed service to children, youth, and families. Values of collaboration, respect, kindness, and compassion drive her lifelong commitment to learning and professional development, dedicated to strengthening the safety and well-being of children and families. Today, Vicky will be talking to us about personal leadership, embracing a growth mindset. It's a pleasure to have you with us, Vicky.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Meryl, for the kind introduction. And it is just an absolute pleasure to be here with you all this morning. And, you know, before I start, I also wanted to take a moment to acknowledge our current context that we are dealing with in terms of the COVID-19 pandemic. And in particular, I wanted to recognize the grave toll that this illness is taking in India right now. I've been reading about the challenges with the high infection rates and the crisis in the medical system and the difficulties in particular around getting oxygen supplies to the areas that need it most. And the suspension of air travel from India into Canada just further exacerbates the challenging climate that we find ourselves in. And on top of this, the farmers' protests continue to add stress and strife. And so I can imagine for many of you, your hearts and minds are in multiple places. And I'd, in this moment, just simply like to honor you, knowing that you have connections to family and community in India. And these are really challenging days for all of us. And yet, you know, we find ways to remain grateful and to be optimistic about our future. And with vaccines available, and I hope in short order, we'll see a decline in our COVID numbers in Ontario here, you know, we can look forward to the future. And many of you are essential workers, and you have continued to provide services to some of our most vulnerable citizens throughout this entire pandemic. And so I just sincerely want to thank you and express my gratitude to each of you for your tireless commitment in these extraordinary times. So thank you so much. So let's get started. Now, give me a moment while I work through the technology. Even though it's been a year, we always seem to still have difficulties with this. So let me try and do this. Okay. So let's get started here. Personal leadership, embracing a growth mindset. So first of all, I need to do a disclaimer. I am not an expert in this. And good news is you don't need to be an expert either. So today, what I'm going to do is just share some of my thoughts with you. I'm going to share my thoughts about leadership, about what it means to have a growth mindset, and how these both come together to strengthen a framework for personal leadership. And have you consider the important role that personal leadership plays in our daily lives. The second disclaimer, well, actually, it's kind of a bit of a confession. I'm not going to lie. While I was tremendously honored to be asked by Charles to speak with you today, I was also a little nervous. I was nervous about what I could offer to you. Would it be of value? Will you like me? Are people going to be bored, fall asleep? Are you planning your grocery list? So, you know, I'm a little bit anxious about that, but I know I'm among friends. And again, it's not about being an expert. So this brings me back to my very first speaking engagement. The year is 1979. And many of you were not born, I realize that. So here I am in Arthur Stringer Public School in London, Ontario. And I know we've got people from around the province, so maybe some of you know where that is. And I'm in a public speaking contest. And my speech my very first speech that I ever did was about the International Year of the Child, which was declared in 1979. So I guess even then I had really noble pursuits, even as a child. And guess what? So I deliver this speech, I'm in my school, and I win. I win the public speaking contest. And so what happens when you win in your school? You get to go on to the regionals. So I go to the regionals and I deliver the very same speech. And guess what? This time, I don't win. I lose. I get second place. So kind of like in the Olympics, where, you know, if you get a bronze, it means you won third. I mean, if you get third, it means you win bronze. And if you get a silver, it means you've lost gold. So kind of like that, imprinted on my mind is that I lost, but not so much that I lost, but the speech that I lost to. The winning speech was Thomas Crapper, the inventor of the toilet. So my visionary speech about the rights of children lost out to a funny story about toilets. So what's the point of this? Where am I going here? Why is she telling us this? Well, you see, well, I didn't realize it at the time, you know, because I was a child. It was through a growth mindset that I was able to continue public speaking. I was able to see the opportunities to grow and improve. And I stand here today doing that with a little bit of performance anxiety. So, of course, leadership is about none of those things. True leadership is about action. It's not about a position. It's not a title. It's not hierarchy. It's not about being in management. It's not a job description. And here are a few definitions of leadership. And maybe I'll just kindly remind people, maybe we go on mute, because there might be some feedback for others who, if there's other background noises. Just give a moment. Okay. Okay, so a few academic definitions of leadership, because we need to have a little bit of academia in here. So the action of leading a group of people or an organization. The process of influencing others to understand and agree about what needs to be done and how to do it. And the process of facilitating individual and collective efforts to accomplish shared objectives. That's a long one. The art of mobilizing others to want to struggle for shared aspirations. A process of social influence in which one person can enlist the aid and support of others in the accomplishment of a common task. There's so many definitions of leadership. There's books, there's podcasts, there's webinars, there's PhD courses, there's so many. Here's a definition that I like. Leadership is a process of social influence which maximizes the efforts of others towards the achievement of a goal. So why do I like this definition amongst all these other ones? Well, let's look at a couple of the key elements. Leadership stems from social influence. not authority, not power. Leadership requires others. And so that implies that it's not about direct reports, it's about other people in our social connected world. There's no mention in this definition about personality traits, attributes, title. There are so many styles and paths that we all can engage in order to have effective leadership. And this definition includes a goal. It's not about influence without any intended outcome. And lastly, what makes this definition a little bit different from others and from those academic definitions is the inclusion of maximizing the efforts of others. It's about coming together as a collective to achieve something greater than ourselves. But a leadership journey doesn't always mean that things are smooth, or that everyone will get along, or that there won't be any conflict, or that we will always see things from the same perspective. An African proverb that I really like, smooth seas do not make skillful sailors. And so it is, in fact, when we are faced with challenges that our leadership is tested. And it is when we're presented with opportunities that come from getting outside of our comfort zone and into a growth zone, that is where the magic can happen for us and for our communities and for our teams and for our work and for our families. So perhaps best said by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at times of challenge and controversy. The comfort zone. Many of you have probably seen this, and this is at the heart of what we're talking about here today. So the comfort zone is our place where we are feeling safe, where everything is in our control, where we have the confidence that we can accomplish anything. But it's pretty limited sometimes in what our experiences are in those moments. And when we start to step outside of that, what can happen for us is we can get into a fear zone. This is where we can start to feel our lack of confidence. We can be affected by what other people think about us. And that can be quite paralyzing. If we allow ourselves to work through the fear zone, we can get to a learning zone. We can deal with the things that are problems. We can find ways to acquire the skills that we need to deal with, the issues that we're facing. And we start to see that our comfort zone can expand a little bit. But it's when we reach a growth zone where we are seeing our dreams actualized, where we are conquering our goals, where we're finding purpose in our lives, that is where we can achieve true growth. So this brings us to the growth mindset, embracing a growth mindset. So did you ever try to learn something as an adult? So for me, excuse me, I'm just gonna sip water. So for me, as an adult learner, I tried to learn to ski. Well, I did learn to ski, but it was all about learning to ski as an adult. And why is it that anything you try to do as an adult learner seems to be 1,000 times more difficult than when we're children? It doesn't matter if it's like a new language or an athletic skill or a craft we're trying to perfect, an art medium, dance. It always seems to be more difficult as an adult learner. And I would say that one of the fundamental differences is that children just don't care. They're curious by nature. They don't pay a lot of attention to what others think about them. They're bold and unaware of their own limitations. I mean, think about it. How often as parents or caregivers are we saying things to children like, be careful, watch out, slow down, maybe you want to do it this way, let me help you. But for children, nothing is impossible. They barrel down that ski hill full speed, exhilarated. And what about adult learners? We might be worried about looking foolish and upstaged by children. We might be afraid to get hurt. We might be focused on the rules of the hill, safety. Those kids aren't following the rules. What is it that I'm really supposed to do here? I want to conform. And so whether it's conscious or subconscious, our most basic beliefs and thoughts strongly affect what we want and whether we will succeed at getting it. And much of what we think we understand about our personality comes from our mindset. And this can both propel us forward, but also prevent us from achieving our full potential. So this brings us to the growth mindset, and this is Carol Dweck's work. And so the good news about growth mindset or fixed mindsets is that we have a choice. Your view of yourself can determine everything. Change your view and you change your experiences and your outcome. If you believe that your qualities are unchangeable, like if you're in that fixed mindset, and if you believe that what you're born with is all you have and all you have to work with, then that's what's going to determine your outcomes and your limitations. Or you can adopt a mindset that builds in growth, that we have the ability to learn from our mistakes, that failure is an opportunity to grow. And so, like stepping up for a public speaking contest or a major professional sports team that loses that big championship, or learning to ski as an adult, you can use these experiences to propel you to the next level, or you can stay in that fear zone and remain stagnant. So in my family, we have a bit of a saying that we use: if you're not falling down, you're not learning. And that it applies on the ski hill, but it also applies to other things you do in your daily life. That if you're not experiencing failure, if you're not experiencing the opportunity to grow, if you're not pushing the boundaries and falling down, then you're not learning and you're not growing. And so a growth mindset is based on the belief that your basic qualities are things that you can cultivate through your efforts. And changing our beliefs can have a powerful impact. A growth mindset creates, establishes that framework for passionate learning. And so going back to that metaphor, smooth seas do not make skilled sailors. The passion for stretching yourself and sticking to it, even when, and especially when things aren't going well, is the hallmark of a growth mindset. This is the mindset that allows people to thrive during some of the most difficult times in their lives. People with a growth mindset recognize that failure can be painful, it hurts, but it doesn't define you. These are situations to respond to. These are situations that we need to face and deal with. And these are also situations that we can learn and grow from. Carol Dweck talks about a story or tells a story about a high school in Chicago. And in this high school, well, like all high schools, you have to pass a certain number of courses in order to graduate. But in this high school, what they did is that if you didn't pass the course, they received a grade of not yet. Not yet. So how great is that? It's not that you failed and all of the negative connotations that can come along with that could be quite limiting, and that could really start to have youth think that they're not good enough. Instead, when you get the grade not yet, what you understand is that you're on a learning path, you're on a learning curve. It gives you a way forward. It gives you a way to envision the future. So putting this all together, personal leadership. So when we integrate the concepts of leadership and a growth mindset, we come to reflect on our own personal leadership. So remember that leadership is not about a title. It's not about being a boss. It is about how we show up each day with humility and self-reflection and a willingness to be a learner. It's embracing a commitment to grow each day in each space and with each interaction that we have. And so I like this graphic. I like these 4 fundamental leadership skills that are for every person in every role. They're not just for people that supervise people. So the first is the importance of self-reflection, starting with starting with looking at your own behavior, your own mindset, and the impact that you can have in your own organization, or in your own classroom, or in your own family, or in your own committee. Communication, it's about communicating in a way that inspires. It's about communicating in a way that helps contribute and adds growth for others. It's about influence and relationships. Relationships that have meaningful connections where we can influence and engage others towards our shared purposes. And it is about being an agile, flexible learner that keeps us in our growth mindset. And so I guess I'm here to tell you today and encourage you to think about your beliefs and your principles and your personal values and your behaviors, and how all of those come together to build your personal leadership philosophy. The way you see people, the way you receive information, the way you respond to situations is all shaped by your personal leadership philosophy. The way you show up each day in your meetings with your clients, with your coworkers, with your teammates, is influenced by your personal leadership philosophy. So in these spaces and places, do you contribute new ideas? Do you offer solutions? Do you participate and speak up? Do you role model positivity? All of these things are informed by your personal leadership philosophy and a growth mindset. How do you help others grow? How do you help others flourish? How do you help others to learn? And you see, this isn't just about those of you who might be in a management role and might have people reporting to you. This is about how you can engage in these things within your community, with your colleagues, with your teams, with your family members. All of these things are driven by your personal leadership philosophy. And so the choice is yours. Sometimes people who have worked with me know that I say this phrase often. Sometimes the most valued gifts come in ugly packages. Remember, it's really easy to demonstrate good leadership in times and moments where we're comfortable. But when you're faced with challenges, when you're faced with feedback that might not be always glowing, but is meant to help you improve, when you are faced with the unknown and might be a little bit fearful, you have a choice. Are you going to accept and open this gift that might come in a bit of an ugly package? Are you going to accept it as an opportunity to stretch you through the fear zone, through the learning zone, and into the growth zone? And so, where will your personal leadership journey take you? What words will you live by? So a couple of quotes and things to have you reflect on as I bring this portion of the conversation to a close. From Maya Angelou: if you are always trying to be normal, you will never know how amazing you can be. That's about stretching ourselves. And from Brene Brown, at the end of the day, at the end of the week, at the end of my life, I want to be able to say that I contributed more than I criticized. So, where will your personal leadership journey take you next? Thank you.
Thanks, Vicky, for that presentation. It was very inspirational, and I know I took a lot from it. I'm sure that others will agree with me as well. And thanks for sharing your personal experience that really helped us to understand the importance of remaining true to personal leadership and embracing that growth mindset.
Thank you so much, Meryl. I really appreciate it. And I was not seeing anybody on the screen. And so I hope that that was helpful to people. And I once again really want to thank you for the privilege of being with all of you here this morning. Thank you so much.
No problem. Now it's time for questions. Please use the chat function to ask Vicky any questions you may have. We are going to start with 2 questions that were asked prior to the session.
Oh.
So, first question is, how do you see the relevance of mentorship in professional development? How has it helped you in your leadership journey?
Wow. Well, I hope that one of the threads that came through the conversation this morning is that the ability to coach and mentor is both something that can happen when you have someone that you are responsible for because you're their manager, or you're in a relationship as a person with a supervisor or a leader who helps direct your work. There's definitely that vertical relationship that can happen between supervisor, leader, and learner, employee, student. But it also can come across horizontally. And so it is critically important. And for me, it has been in the moments where, some of my greatest learning moments have not been from my boss, although many of you know my big boss. And I think he has been here and spoken to you, Mr. Rav Baines. So I learn a tremendous amount from him. He has given me the gift of being able to explore and expand leadership and personal leadership. But some of the biggest gifts I get in my leadership journey is about what frontline colleagues tell me. It's about what supervisors that report to me tell me. It's about the advice that they give me. And so it's in those moments that we feel and recognize that we're part of something that is a collective. And so, yes, I have a title. We all have titles and roles that we play. But when we're really engaged in supporting the development, coaching, and mentoring of others, those things are important because it's about, again, that definition around that social connection and that social influence that brings us together to achieve something that is greater than all of us. Hope that helps.
Definitely. That was really well answered. Another question we have is, how should one navigate and network at different levels within larger organizations in the leadership journey?
It's a great question. Okay, so what I would bring you back is to that diagram with the circles, right? Your comfort zone and then stretching out of that. So if you're really wanting to find ways to grow your connections in your organization and to grow your leadership, it is and to build your network and to build that network of social influence, it is about getting out of that comfort zone, right? That's where the magic happens. So you can do, and for some people that's okay. So don't get me wrong, like some people are really happy to be in their role, to do what they do and to do it well. And I honor that. It's extraordinary. But in the moments where you want to kind of step out, what you have to do is face your fears. You have to find your voice to speak up in that meeting, to join that committee that you might think you don't know anything about the subject matter, but go into it with an opportunity or with the mindset to learn, to find the ways to express what's, ask the question, express what's on your mind, find ways to elevate other people, because sometimes you're going to be in conversations and you think about like, why am I here? This isn't even about me. Like my job is something else, or my presentation in my classroom is about something else, or I'm not interested in working with the seniors community, so I don't need to listen to that. But it's in those moments that you can add value through your contributions and through your questions and through contributing to the growth of others. And sometimes even in the silence, it's about your own personal reflection around what you're listening to and hearing. So it's both what you can do internally in terms of managing your mindset, and also about what you can contribute to the experience of others that you're sharing in that moment.
Thank you. Thanks again, Vicky, for taking the time to answer all our questions. The topic covered was very informative and motivating. We would love to see you back with us sometime soon, and please do consider yourself part of MASWO.
I do. Thank you so much. It's been such a great opportunity.
Hi.
Oh, hi. Is somebody saying something?
Yeah, thank you. Hi, Meryl. Sorry, I have someone send me a question as well. If you can, answer to that as well. Sorry to interrupt you, Meryl. They send me personally. Is leadership a calling or something acquired? What is the most challenging situation you encountered as a leader, and how did you address it? And what was your takeaway from that?
Oh my God. I would say the first part, I think it is both a calling, but also something you can develop, right? So absolutely, it can be learned, and it should be learned. And it's something that you invest in every day, in every way, in every space. So we're never finished learning, right? So even, I think one of the things I would want to say to you is, even myself, who's been doing this work for so many years, I learn every day. And I'm committed to that learning every day. The most difficult experience I faced, I mean, I don't know, there's been so many. I don't want to center one. But what I'll say to you is that in those most difficult moments, whether it be about something that happens in a family that we're trying to provide service to, or if it happens in relation to an interpersonal experience I'm having, in my workplace, or on a committee I sit in, what I try to do is look for the silver lining and find what is the meaning in this moment for me. What is it that I can take away and learn from? Because I can really stay stuck in feeling sorry for myself, or blaming others, or, finding excuses for what's happening. And okay, so I'm not going to lie, sometimes I do that for a few minutes, because, we're human and it's on a continuum. But then I have to find a way to have myself think about what is the purpose of this in my life. And that's where I say gifts come in ugly packages. Find the silver lining, step out beyond what the immediate experience is, to find the opportunity to grow and make a commitment to do better. And that's one of the other, quotes of Maya Angelou that is so pivotal, right? When you know better, do better. And that really speaks to learning and growing. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Vicky.
Okay, so up next, we have Anju. Anju is our guest speaker of the month. Anju has completed her master's in social work from Rajagiri College of Social Sciences and is a registered social worker with over 10 years of experience working with at-risk youth and their families, addressing problems related to addiction and mental health issues. Anju has experience with psychosocial assessments, interventions, counseling, crisis intervention in the child, youth, and family welfare setting. Anju did IESW program at Ryerson University as soon as she arrived in Canada in 2017. Upon completion of the program, she joined the Peel Children's Center as a child and family clinician with the Intensive Treatment Services. Anju will be joining her new role as a social worker at Roy McMurtry Youth Justice Services Division under the Ministry of Children, Community and Social Services. Anju is going to be speaking to us about crisis and what it's like to be a crisis worker. Due to time limitations, we will be taking only a few questions, but MASWO will be having a more elaborate session on crisis in the near future. That being said, if there are any questions that go unanswered, feel free to email MASWO's Gmail account and they will return your emails.
Just before we start, Meryl, just a clarification. I work with the not with the Peel Children's Center. I actually work with the Canadian Mental Health Association's crisis support program. Just a clarification there.
Thank you for making that correction.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, so it's really great to have you with us today, Anju, and I'm really excited, and I'm sure the rest of us watching online are also, to learn and have a better understanding of crisis. Let's start with the questions.
Sure, go ahead.
What is crisis in general, and what is mental health crisis?
Right. So I'm not going into detail of definition of crisis, but as we all know, crisis is any situation or an event that happens to a person's life, which could be an unexpected one. It can be something that either, as just borrowing from what Vicky just mentioned, either helping the individual to grow from it or causing a sudden breakdown in the in the person's life. Now, we call something a crisis when there is actually a breakdown in the person's personal or social life. Now, the most important thing about crisis is it's more subjective than objective, because it varies from person to person. So what is crisis to me might not be a crisis to another individual. I can give you a very simple example. Like, say you go into somebody, like you go start talking to someone and you realize that the reason why the person reached out to a crisis worker was because the internet just stopped working at home, or there was no power for the whole day, or maybe they lost a pet in their life. Now, when you analyze the situation, like when you first hear the situation initially, you might consider that not to be a crisis if you are going to assume from your social location. But the most important point here is to listen to the individual from their social location and from what area that they come from and how this crisis is affecting them individually. The most important factor here is to understanding how this crisis is affecting this individual in their personal and social life. So that is more of a crisis that we would be speaking about in the context of a crisis intervention. So sorry, did I miss out the next part of the question? Okay, sorry.
That's good. What are the stressors and tools that you use, especially when related to like mental health crisis?
Yeah, so what we speak about a mental health crisis is nothing different from another crisis that happens to an individual. The only part of mental health crisis that we focus on is how it affects the mental well-being of an individual. So does the person react with a panic attack? Does the person go into a depression? Does the person have any suicidal thoughts? Or has the person thought of a plan or an intent to end their life because they are not able to handle this crisis situation? So that is what we call as a mental health crisis. There is absolutely no difference between the situation that the person is when it compares to the crisis or a mental health crisis. Now, what are the stressors we come across? As I said, the stressors differs from person to person. So it could be as simple as like, say, not being able to get a hold of a friend today, a friend not answering my call today, or it could go as to the extent of having lost somebody that was very close to their lives, or losing an opportunity that they were looking forward to, not able to get into a job opportunity that they were looking for, or an educational opportunity that was a dream in their life. These are some of the things that we look at. But the approach that we take towards these stressors depends on the influence or the effect of these stressors in the individual's life. So that would be like a personal discussion that the crisis worker would have with the individual, and it goes on to the extent of how much the crisis is affecting the individual. I hope I answered your question.
Good, thank you. What are the roles and responsibilities of a crisis worker?
The major role of a crisis worker, again, as I said, is to like as we simply say about a social worker in general, is to listen to the individual. Because a lot of times when we receive calls from individuals on a crisis line, something that people would say is, the reason why I'm calling is just because I want to talk to someone. And it's as simple as that. There is nobody who understands what the individual goes through, and what is it that is causing so much of a crisis. And a lot of times it is more like bringing the person to an awareness that this is crisis. So we would be basically acknowledging the crisis situation that they are in, and even addressing the fact that what they're going through right now is a crisis or could lead to a crisis. So a very important role of a crisis worker is to listen to the individual and understand the fact that this is a personal crisis without a judgment. So that's a very important role that a crisis worker does. And on top of that, we would, again, depending on what the crisis situation is, we would be looking into interventions. So it could be, so a lot of situations we could deal with the crisis situation right on the phone call. Sometimes we would have to do more than that, like go and meet the person in the community face to face, do an elaborate assessment with the person, and depending on the assessment, we would be referring the person to appropriate resources, which could be long-term therapy, which could be referring them to their back to their family doctors if they require any medication supports, or maybe helping them find a psychiatrist if they have more of a mental health concern, or referring them to organizations in the community that can support them further with their crisis situation.
So it really sounds like the basic skills of social work, like active listening and engaging clients, resource allocation, these are the main roles and responsibilities that a crisis worker actually.
Absolutely. Without doubt, we cannot differentiate between what, like we cannot divide and separate between a social work role and a crisis intervention role, because this goes hand in hand.
Thank you. What are some challenges that you face or you're faced with in your role?
Something that I mean, I wouldn't take that as a challenge, as Vicky rightly mentioned. It is a learning opportunity. There are sometimes, especially under this pandemic situation, we have a lot more calls than usual. So when I say calls, I would also want people to know that we have to take calls or crisis calls on in our capacity in this role, where we would answer calls from people who are in a crisis situation. So again, as I said, it would range from a simple crisis situation to a major suicidal thoughts or an attempt even, and then we would have to respond accordingly. So one of the major challenge would be to understand the individual from their social location on that phone call, because it's different when you are seeing an individual in person versus when you're talking to somebody on the phone.
Right.
Because a lot of times you are only listening to what the person is saying, and there is always a barrier. Phone is always a barrier when it comes to somebody sharing their emotional responses to you, right? Because you're not seeing what their facial expression is, what kind of a situation that they are living in, their social location, their social atmosphere, things like that. So that is definitely a challenge, but then we do our best to try to build a trust right in the beginning of the call, so the person is able to share those informations with you. Another thing is the crisis worker maintaining a balance between like a self-care after taking so many calls and dealing with so many crisis situations. There is a good chance that we could get burnt out. So that is something we keep in mind very often. And the good thing about our team, the crisis team, is we do check-ins every so often. It could be maybe every 10 minutes, every 15 minutes. We even, since we are working virtually right now, we do pass a lot of funny jokes, a lot of emojis on the screens, a lot of those things to make each other feel better. We check in. We have team leads who would be checking in with each other. We can debrief with our team if there was a very tough call. We can always take a break, debrief with the team, and make sure that you're out of that heavy call and you're able to take a breather in between, so you can come back and continue with your work.
You already answered my next question, which was how do you maintain your mental health and your self-care? So what are some things you love about your job?
It's as I said, like the previous question that you asked, what are some of your challenges? Something I love about my job is it's challenging. Right? It is challenging. It is like every call or every individual we come across is it's unpredictable. You cannot say what your next caller would be, or what your next individual who you're going to deal with would be. Could be a major, one example that I have is one of my first calls was when an individual called and said, I hanged myself and the rope broke. Now I feel I should be living. So what can you do about it? So it can be very intense like that. Or simple things like recently, something that we've come across a lot is people going through a lot of anxiety because of pandemic, because of social isolation, not able to meet with their friends, not able to speak with individuals who they normally would meet, especially with youngsters. With youth, there is a lot of anxiety that we've seen, and that is something that we would be looking into. So one of the major something that I love about this job is the unpredictability of the calls. And it's like you're learning every single time that you're dealing with an individual. It's a learning opportunity. A lot of things I've learned from my from the people that I've interacted with. And like, say one person says, okay, this is how I've dealt with my issue, and I learn a new coping strategy there, which I can actually use in another circumstance. So it's a mutual learning process.
Right. Okay, makes sense. What about AOP? How do you incorporate AOP with crisis intervention?
That's a very good question, because something that we identify, as we know that it's like anti-oppressive practices become like a huge factor in our work, in social work interventions these days. When we discuss or when we come into contact with an individual in a crisis line or otherwise, there are a lot of layers of barriers that this individual is facing. And a lot of times the person would come to us with one single aspect of their life. But when we are able to go through the different, the different layers, and when we build that rapport and able to speak about the different aspects of that individual's life, that brings out a lot more information about why this person is going through this crisis. So the cultural factors definitely affects the social location that the person is. So the aim of a crisis intervention worker is basically to understand the different aspects of the person's social location, and then help the individual cope with that crisis situation based on those different aspects of their life. So a lot of times we use the cultural what do you say, the cultural beliefs and cultural coping strategies that they already have in their cultural beliefs. We use that as a way of helping the individual to cope with their stressor, rather than giving them a totally new aspect that they are not familiar with. So it is very important to know the different social locations and the different cultural factors. So AOP becomes a very big factor. And also even educating the individual, if the person is going through something which is more of a systemic kind of a barrier. And the person is not able to identify this. The role of a crisis worker is to educate the person that the issue is not just in you, it is more systemic. So a lot of education piece goes into our work with the crisis, like in the crisis situations.
Makes sense. That structural piece is so important to address and take apart.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay. What about the role of police? How does your partnership with police help, and does it pose challenges?
Yes. So just for the information of the people here, one of our role, we work in partnership with the Peel Regional Police and OPP. So few of the roles that we have. So police, we work with police in two different aspects. One, we have police officers working with us on a continuous basis for 3 years. So they have a posting with us for 3 continuous years, where the speciality of this team is the officers are in plain clothes. So they are in plain clothes, and we ride along or go into the community in unmarked cars. So the car doesn't say police in it. This is mainly to reduce the stigma of mental health and policing, because a lot of times this doesn't go hand in hand, especially with all that we hear, with the problems that police and mental health clients have had in the community. So that is one aspect of our work. The other aspect is where police, like we work in partnership with police on 911 calls. So that is more of a rapid response team, and it is called a mobile rapid response team. We work, so our crisis workers work on 911 calls, and they respond to mental health crisis situations that come through a 911 call. So when somebody calls 911, the dispatcher would assess the situation, and if they feel that it is more appropriate to have a mental health team attend this call, then they would be sending our rapid response team. The difference between the two teams is, one, the first team that I said was plain clothes. It's more of a visit that we organize on an appointment basis. Very rarely we would actually go in without information or without telling the client. But the other team is more through the 911 call. So it is more of an emergency response. The positive side of it is a lot of times mental health calls or crisis situations come through 911 calls. So since we are working with police, it is a lot more people come into our attention, and we are able to get to a lot of these calls and then follow up from there. The challenge here is, again, as I said, since we've had a lot of not good responses with police and mental health calls, a lot of times, especially when incidences such as that had happened, we got a lot of calls where people were anxious about why police is present in these calls. So one of our major role there was to educate people as to why police is present and how it could be beneficial for the individual as well as for our team. So we bring the safety aspect a lot here in picture. We would tell them to a great extent that it is a safety measure for both them and for us, and to kind of maintain the law and order in the community. And another aspect of this, of having police with us, is when we are having mental health apprehensions. So when we have to take somebody to the hospitals without their consent, if they're going through a major mental health breakdown, then it is only through the police partners that we could be able to do that. So
it's really interesting to see the different ways that organizations are trying to implement like strategic and creative ways to ensure that people in positions of power, like police, are not re-traumatizing or they're trying to mitigate re-traumatizing experiences. So
absolutely.
That's really interesting. And my last question is, how can people apply for this position, a crisis worker position? What qualifications and skills does a person need to be a crisis worker? And what are some things people need to know when applying for this position?
Okay, I might just ask you for the other parts of the question. because I'm getting a bit confused. Okay, no problem. So the first part, I would say a very important requirement for this is a master's in social work and a license or registration with the Ontario College of Social Workers and Social Services Workers. Now, once you have a social work master's, you can apply to this position. So you can find the postings either in the Canadian Mental Health Association's websites, or it is available in other websites like Indeed. If you are an IESW graduate from Ryerson University, then within the IESW program, like within the email link that you have, there is always this posting that comes up. One thing that I want people to know is just because you do not have a mental health background, you still can apply to this position as long as you are flexible enough to learn a lot of these mental health related issues as you go. But basic things that you need to know is the Mental Health Act, 100%, because that we use on a daily basis. The different forms that we use. So if you go into the Mental Health Act per se, so Mental Health Act of Ontario, if you go into that, you will actually find the different forms. And the most important ones we use is Form 1, Form 2, Form 47. These are at least minimum. These are the 3 forms you should be knowing. Then the different scenarios. So if you're going in, or if you have an opportunity to attend an interview, think of some of the scenarios that you would come across if you are selected into a crisis position. What are some of the scenarios? You can think of anything from, like, say, your day-to-day life. What are the things that you have come across, or your personal life? How would you deal with this situation if you are in a crisis support workers role in the same situation? So those are some of the scenarios. You can always check in with the MASWO committee, because sometimes when there are postings, we would also be putting them up on the MASWO's WhatsApp link. So you can even check those out.
It was a 3-part question and you answered all 3 parts of it. So thank you.
Okay, that's nice.
So thanks again, Anju. I definitely learned a lot. Your scenario examples and case examples really helped me to solidify my understanding of crisis. Thanks again for taking the time to be here today and engage in this discussion with me.
Thank you.
Now, I'd like to ask MASWO Executive Member Alan to wind up the session.
I guess some people had their hands raised, or was it just
I think we were clapping.
Oh, okay. Sorry. That was my mistake. I thought they had questions. Thank you so much.
Hi everyone. It is with my great pleasure. I would like to thank, and on behalf of MASWO Executive and MASWO members, it was great listening to Vicky, the wonderful speaker for the day, and also Anju. And thank you, Meryl and Anju, for putting things together, and it was great. You guys did an awesome job, and MASWO will be continuing supporting the community with various programs. And we will be happy to share those programs in social media platforms. So please follow. So everybody enjoy the day, rest of the weekend, and have a good day and take rest. Thank you. Bye. Stay safe.